were young people, energetic and determined and just getting out of their training. And by golly, they really did things that were unheard of. Got research grants and published papers, and Dr. Longmire said at one point, Harvard General Hospital is more productive than the mother institution here at the Center for the Health Sciences, UCLA in Westwood. And there was some truth in that, too. At any rate, I think that was a very meaningful point in my career and was responsible for my coming to San Diego, because everybody was talking about Harvard General Hospital. I'd never heard of it before. Some people, I remember I got a letter addressed to Harvard General Hospital, but it became known throughout the country. And as a result, in the short period of time in the year 1965, I was invited into consideration for the chairmanship of surgery at Yale, the chairmanship of surgery at the University of Chicago, the chairmanship of surgery at the University of Texas, the chairmanship of surgery at Columbia, and the chairmanship of surgery at UCSD as the first chair of the department. That's, that's staggering to receive invitations like that. At that time, I think I was 37 years old. But there was no question in my mind what I would be interested in. Here was this new medical school in San Diego, the only medical school in the city. And the university was determined to make the required investment to make it an outstanding medical school. And it had, I'll say a word in a moment about the start of the university, but the chance to take something from the ground up and build it from the ground up was not existent at any of these other institutions. Going to Yale, a well-established institution where the traditions were long, and trying to mold that institution into what I thought was appropriate appeared to me to be much less attractive than coming to San Diego. So I accepted the chair here in the year 1965. It was actually in the beginning of June in 1965 as the first member of the faculty here and the first chair of a department. And between 65 and January of 67, I went back and forth between Harvard General Hospital, where I retained the position of chief of surgery, and UCSD, where I was the chairman designate of the Department of Surgery, spending a few days at each place, going back and forth. Not sure that was so wise. I became known, at that time, the airline going back and forth with PSA, and I became known as the PSA chair of surgery because I traveled on it so frequently.
Who were some of the surgeons that you were working with here, or
Well,
discussions about the university?
When I came, of course, there were no other faculty members.
No.
One of my first jobs was to chair the committee to select the chairman of the Department of Medicine. And there was a committee of university people, professors in the university, and we recruited Eugene Brownwald to become the chairman of medicine. He was the first chairman of medicine. And then one after another, the department chairs were recruited. I'm going to deal with it. I chaired the committee that recruited Brownwald, that recruited Elliot Lesser, the chairman of radiology, and one other, no, that was in our department. I had full responsibility for that. I'll get to that in just a minute. But you asked me who were the surgeons,
yes.
And the county hospital which had signed an agreement with the university so that it became, in 1965, what was called the University County Hospital, or the County University Hospital of San Diego. Signed an agreement whereby UCSD would staff and run the county hospital. And when I came here, there was an internship in surgery, there was a residency in surgery, and there was a remarkable cadre of volunteer private practice physicians who ran the programs here. And I remember many of them. Ralph Ocampo had graduated from that program. Joe Devon was a resident in the program at the time. Dick Jones was one of the volunteer people.
Ed Greer.
Less so Ed Greer, but Rick Tullis was an active member. Hodge Crabtree over at Mercy was an active member. Marvin James, who was working then out at Grossmont, he was a member of the staff at Grossmont. And Bob DeReamer, you remember him?
Vividly.
And they ran the place, and in point of fact, I couldn't have established a university program without their help. It was said in subsequent statistics that the Department of Surgery had more volunteer attending faculty, people in private practice who shared in the teaching, than any other department in the school. And that was true. And that, of course, brings up another point, which is the relationships between the town and the gown, between the university and the practitioners in the community. It is a fact that the medical community was strongly supportive of having a medical school here. And they were vocal in their support, and I think were very helpful in getting the state to establish another medical school here. And I do think that once the school was established and the full-time faculty began to build, some of the practicing physicians in the community were disappointed that the roles that they had played when it was a county hospital were diminished, sometimes markedly diminished. I think that was less so in surgery than in other departments, medicine in particular. When I look at the assignments of services in the year 1967, for example, it was just filled with people we all know who were practicing. Some are still practicing, many of them are retired, not all alive, but you know all of the names of the people and assigned to services. Ralph Ocampo was on Surgery Service A, and Dick Jones was on Surgery Service B. We had 3 surgery services, and so on and so forth. And my sense is that in surgery, more than in any department in the school, there was a warm relationship between the full-time faculty and the private practitioners of surgery. But I do have to say that that wasn't true uniformly throughout the school. And there was a perception in some departments that the university doctors, many of whom were people of international stature, were arrogant and looked down their noses at the practitioners. And I do have to tell you that if I can tell you what my assessment was of medicine in San Diego when I arrived here. it was, first and foremost, very clean. None of the hanky-panky that is commonplace in Southern California, in the Los Angeles area, was present here. Nothing like fee splitting, none of the underhanded practices took place here. And that was a comfort. On the other hand, specialization in surgery was not as well developed as in some other metropolitan areas. It was a town of 450,000 people. Greater San Diego was 450,000 people. Now it's close to 3 million. And it had good, solid practitioners, but the specialization was not as well developed as in some other metropolitan areas. I do think that the medical school had an influence on changing that, and it did change markedly. Today, I mean, it's very different from what it was then. I do have to say that it was my expectation, and the expectation of other arriving faculty members, that patients would be referred from the community to the university for specialized care. And I think that was a naive expectation. In actual fact, it occurred in some areas, but in many areas it didn't occur. And I say naive because it's understandable when someone is in practice in the community, their livelihood depends upon the patients they see, and they're not so willing to send them somewhere else. And the relationships they develop, you all know this very well, are with their colleagues in various other specialties, various other disciplines, and those relationships are very important and have to be maintained. And so there isn't, they don't readily send patients out of their own systems. They do to some extent, but not as much as was hoped for. Design of the medical school was laid down before I arrived, and it was that there would be few departments and that there would be multiple divisions within departments of the various specialties, so that I think there were only 9 departments in the entire school. And the teaching of anatomy uniquely was done in the Department of Surgery. And that was a charge that we had that was carried out, I must say, in a spectacular fashion by Nicholas Halaz. He is responsible. That is his lasting legacy, I think, in this institution, in this city. He developed the teaching of anatomy primarily by surgeons and involving surgeons in practice in the community in teaching anatomy as a second-year course to medical students. And instead of being a dull rite of passage that I had to go through, or you all had to go through, it became a really enjoyable course. Well, I had the responsibility for recruiting 64 people in the Department of Surgery, 64 surgeons, in all of the specialties: cardiothoracic, general surgery, of course. Anesthesia was in the Department of Surgery, and neurosurgery, plastic surgery, orthopedics, otolaryngology, ophthalmology, and urology. All of those were divisions of the Department of Surgery, but the design that existed when I came here, needless to say,